Hello and welcome to the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. This is your regular update for all your tillage news and advice. In this episode, I will continue with a series of interviews with tillage farmers who are involved with various programs within Teagasc. Recently, we chatted to Vincent Mahon, who's farming in Meath, and his advisor Shane Kennedy about his involvement in the Signpost Farm programme. So today we will look at the Enable Conservation Tillage Project, which is run by Teagasc, to look at how farmers can embrace non-plough based tillage systems and at the same time cope with grass weeds which can emerge in the system. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Bill Shanahan, a farmer in Waterford, and his ECT project advisor, John Mahon. Bill, I might come to you first. Can you give us an idea of the farm structure in terms of owned or leased land and how fragmented this land is, and also around the rotation or a type of rotation that you've run on your farm?
Well, Michael, in keeping with the area, we would have dairy cows as well as some tillage. And I suppose on the tillage end of things, we have owned and leased land, and we do contract farming for a neighbour as well. And on the dairy, mostly owned with a little bit of leased.
And in terms of your rotation, Bill, what sort of way is that? What do you try to get around into your crops?
It's not fixed in stone, Michael, to be honest with you. We have one block of land 14 miles away, and that's continuous spring barley for the particular situation that it's in. But we would grow winter wheat, winter barley, winter oilseed rape, spring oats, and spring barley. So we would tend to rotate oats, wheat, and winter barley with some oilseed rape thrown in on other blocks other than that particular block I spoke about.
All right. Okay. So, and the flexibility then arises around what you can get in at the time, or does it rise around something more fundamental than that? What contracts you can get a hold of, or how do you decide, I suppose?
Well, to be honest with you, oats is an important crop in our area, because Flahavans are a local buyer, and there's a long history of growing oats around here. But we would grow oats and follow it with wheat and maybe a couple of winter barleys. Now, that has been our approach as regards take all over many, many years. It worked very well. However, we have restarted growing oilseed rape because of a bit of an ingress of sterile brome around headlands in particular. So we've gone back to rapeseed, not having grown it for 15 years maybe.
Okay. And the rape is coming in just in terms of your cultivation system then, you're non-plough based, are you?
Mostly non-plough based, yes. And I wouldn't describe it as mini-till at all, Michael, because we have deep loosening legs on it. And it's a machine that has discs and legs incorporated, let's say, and it would give a sure cultivation down as many inches as you want, but we would normally work 6 inches deep with the legs.
Okay, so you're I think it's known as deep non-inversion or something like that, I think.
Well, it certainly is not mini-till anyway, that's for sure.
Sure. Okay. And in terms then of the soil types, is it light, heavy, medium? What sort of soils do you have?
With the exception of one field, it's all free draining soils. There would be a fair percentage of shale throughout, but look, it's all easy to manage soil, really, to be honest with you. Generally easy to till, and would be free draining.
And would it be a bit of a jump to say because you have a dairy herd, you put a lot of their organic manures back onto the tillage ground, and hence you might have good fertility on your tillage ground, or do you have an idea where that is?
We would try to incorporate as much organic manures as we can. Now, that would include pig slurry where appropriate, chicken dung on various blocks, and organic fertilizer from the dairies tends to go back into silage ground. Okay. So but that said, we would try to have as much organic manured influence as we possibly could have.
Sure. And your fertility is pretty good then in your soils then all around?
Funny, look, we have a couple of blocks. There is one block that's leased, and one part of it is very low on P, and the other block, part of leased from the same person, is low on K. There are issues we've been trying to deal with over years, and we would be applying strong rates of either 10-10-20 or chicken dung there, and our pig slurry on the other part, and finding it difficult enough now to get the P up in one block. But generally speaking, our P and K levels would be okay, yeah.
Be pretty good. Okay. And in terms of being in a non-inversion based or non-plough based system, for the most part, was there a reason that you changed away from the plough for mostly?
As I said to you, we're doing cows as well, all right? And we've limited labour. So the springs in particular are very busy. And so we looked around at some way to try and speed it up some bit. And we decided to go down this route that we can make a little bit better headway every day when we're at it. And that really was it. And we wanted the fields to become a little bit more level. We found that with the plough, as much as you would try, you tend to have uneven fields, to be honest with you. And so, look, and we would, as also, because we were using as much organic fertilizer as we could, we would be incorporating it into the top 3 or 4 inches of soil with that particular implement. And we reckoned that was going to be a much better job.
Your yields have held up reasonably well in the conversion phase or between one and the other now when you look back at it?
I can't see any difference in the yields, to be honest with you, Michael. No, with ours, the non-ploughing tends, you have to work in good conditions. You just can't do it in poor conditions. So I suppose that has a benefit for the soil. And, you know, the theory of there being better humus, or what do you call that, soil, organic matter improving, you know, that tends to help a little bit as well, I'd say, yeah.
Okay. John, I want to bring you in. John, you are advising Bill around the ECT, or the Enable Conservation Tillage Project. And I was just wondering, in terms of that project and Bill's farm, how typical is he of farms within the project?
Hi, Michael. Well, within the project itself, we're working with 10 focus farms, we call them, and the various establishment methods from ploughing to min-till. We have some strip till and some direct drilling as well. And I suppose Bill has explained there his method of establishment. He's not untypical of other min-till participants in the project from an establishment point of view. So I suppose he's quite similar from that perspective. But where Bill and his son James's farm is quite unique. Historically, there's an imported blackgrass situation which developed and went undetected for a number of years, several years ago, when we knew less about blackgrass and its identification at that time. And this blackgrass population, unknown to everybody, seemed to have a herbicide resistance problem as well, which went undetected. So attempts to control it early on in play through pure chemical means failed. So I suppose by the time Bill discovered the extent of the problem through our own project and through herbicide resistant testing, he was left with a totally different scenario of control options to someone, say, who has only discovered blackgrass in the last number of years, and a serious seed bank had built up. So it's a very unique situation.
Okay, so he's different in that regard, and coming back then to he's trying, Bill's efforts, and you've been working closely with him in terms of the efforts trying to deal with that. Are there a number of areas do you think Bill should be particularly proud of in terms of how he's gone about that control? And I suppose maybe there's always a flip side to these things. Are there a couple of areas you think that maybe could be improved on a bit?
Bill and James, anyway, they should be very proud of the fact that their experience is of massive benefit to any other people who are looking from the outside in, because they may find themselves in a similar situation without having the benefit of their experience, and that's really important to acknowledge. I suppose the way they've methodically worked through a limited number of cultural control methods, and use the knowledge that we've gained from our UK counterparts on blackgrass's life cycle and where its weaknesses are. Using those methodically, we've slowly reduced the numbers in the field and prevented its spread to other areas on the farm. For example, like blackgrass, it mainly germinate in the autumn months. particularly in September and October. So by switching in the last number of years, Bill will tell you he has switched to spring barley cropping in that particular area. So in conjunction, that will allow him to do several stale seed beds, or he has on some occasions used cover cropping as well to flush out the seed bank. And as I said, we're monitoring all the time in the project with weed counts, and I think the figures are something startling. Like, he started with 60 plants per square meter, and now we're down to literally 1 to 3 per meter square. It's fantastic progress he's made. Also, quite unique, I found on the project was a competitive crop like spring barley at very high seed rates. I think, Bill, from memory, was something like 14 stone per acre, or over 200 kilos to the hectare, and it smothered out the old blackgrass plant coming up. Anyone that was at our ECT crop walk in June was fascinated by the fact it just was one main stem and no tiller whatsoever from a plant that can produce normally 10 to 12 to 15 tillers.
Bill, can I bring you back in on that in terms of you're obviously at the cutting edge of this, trying to control this very vicious weed, I suppose you might like to call it. How do you think your progress has gone, or maybe even your knowledge, I suppose, on how to try and deal with it, and how do you think that that has been deployed on your farm in terms of the results you're seeing today?
Well, I suppose, Michael, if you wouldn't mind, if I go back a number of years, we noticed this grassweed, and we were concerned about it. And look, we weren't able to get it identified until I think 2016, when Kieran Collins was able to do it. But anyway, we had the previous crop that year might have been winter barley, I think. No, the previous crop, sorry, and then we had spring oats, and then we had winter wheat, and it was getting kind of out of control. And it was, if you can go back to years when you were very young, I suppose, if you remember, Scotch grass went to be vigorous and competing strongly with the crop. It would remind you of that. Okay, so anyway, we took we got it identified, and we tried chemical control, and to no avail. So we decided that the best thing to do was go down the spring barley route. Now, we were only planting the spring barley at normal seeding rates then, and spring barley was a great improvement over the winter wheat, but we needed to do something else. So we increased the seeding rate, and we tried a few different things as well. And as far as I can see, the increased seeding rate, it probably has had the most effect.
For lots of our listeners might be thinking, well, sure, if you've blackgrass, sure, isn't there a herbicide for that? Or can't we control it with a herbicide? What would you say to that?
I can't remember the chap that came down from Oak Park at first, but he took samples of all of the grasses that he found, and unfortunately they were resistant to our range of chemicals, and so we didn't have a chemical option. And as far as I'm aware, the only reliable chemical at the moment, and I stress at the moment, would be the one for the oilseed rape, which would be Curb, and all of the rest of them would be failing on it,
So at the moment, you're relying pretty much on cultural control or non-chemical control to try and control your blackgrass.
Well, the Roundup would be our only chemical input into it on the stale seedbeds, yeah.
Okay. And in terms of are you combining that with hand roguing and those kind of measures as well?
I'm afraid in our situation, Michael, hand roguing just would not be an option. It's a very difficult thing to hand rogue blackgrass, and you'd want to be very fit, and you could spend days at it, and then you'd look back a few days later and you would see that your efforts would have been in vain, really. So I think hand roguing, okay, it would be suitable for some situations, but not for the situation that we had in this field anyway.
Okay, and so then the chances are you're left with a little residual of blackgrass in that field year on year. I suppose maybe you're going to put up with that, but how do you manage that then in terms of not allowing that to spread to your own fields through your combine, or I'm not sure whether you use a contractor or not, or indeed maybe your neighbour's fields?
We have our own combine, right? So we have to pay particular attention to cleaning it. Okay. But this is the biggest problem with the blackgrass. Trying to prevent the spread is a huge time-consuming issue. And to be successful, we'd be hoping we would be, but that's where I find the greatest weakness is preventing the spread of it. Now, look, we would never allow. The field we're in a grassland area, so the spread of it, we would be hoping is not going to happen. But nevertheless, it is of great concern, yeah. And that's why I think that, you can't afford to leave it get to a stage where you're going to have viable, mature seeds blowing around the place. So we would be hoping the spring barley, by the nature of it, will be avoiding that.
Okay, and so far so good. You've managed to corral it, I suppose, maybe into that one or two fields that you have, and it hasn't really got anywhere else, is it?
We have, even in spite of cleaning down the combine following this one, we have come across one or two seeds in another two fields actually, where we've hand rogued those, and we'll be hoping that it won't become an issue.
So, John, can I come back to you then? So, in terms of Bill's system reasonably well inside out, and in terms of the coming years, he's going to continue to plant crops within that field. Is there any advice you can give to Bill in what to do over the coming years, or maybe for other farmers who find themselves in a kind of a similar situation where they have found blackgrass for the first time and they want to try and make sure that it doesn't go any further?
Well, in relation to Bill's particular place, like we're going to have to continue with cultural control methods, but there are a few further options which we are considering, and we have spoken about this for the coming years. We do have the option of using the pre-emergence trialate, the likes of Avidex factor in combination with something like pendimethalin on spring barley. And we have discussed possibly just trying that in the future for this coming season. As regards rotational, Bill spoke there about that he grows some oilseed rape. We have discussed using the likes of carb or astrocarb for next year, with the hope that we will follow up then with a crop of winter wheat when the new BASF chemistry Luximo will have been launched this time 2 years in autumn 2024. So there are possibilities of getting in there with new chemistry. Luximo has been launched in the UK for this autumn under the name Luxinum Plus. And we'll all be waiting with bated breath to see how it performs. But in trials which have been carried out in Ireland, it seems to be extremely useful chemistry. And then, like, we must always protect that and not use them on their own, and then also stick with chemistries like flufenicet for stacking of chemistries with winter wheat at a later stage. I suppose just to the second part of your question there, for anyone new to blackgrass, hopefully at this stage you will have a sample collected before the combine went through it, and it is sent in to us already for herbicide resistant testing, because this has to be a starting point for effective control to know if chemistry is working on it and which ones work on it. Also that you would have mapped out the areas affected so you can monitor the progress as time goes on. What I would always say to people is to try and trace back and see where the infection occurred. This will give you an idea of the scale of the seed bank you're dealing with, and that will give you an idea of the length of time it's going to take to get you out of the situation going forward. Rotation has to come into your thoughts. If sometimes it means changing plans that you have, but you must be prepared to change that, because there are some crops, the likes of oilseed rape we've discussed, or beans, or switching to a spring crop, or say winter wheat, will offer you the best chemical control if you have susceptible black grass. So, you have to be prepared to change and make a little bit of adjustments to your rotation. And they will allow you to come in with the cultural control methods like stale seed beds and cover crops, etc.
Okay, so it's what you're saying then, really, John, is it's identification first, have a good varied rotation in it, make sure that if you're going with chemical control, that that there's whatever chemistry you're going to use is effective against it in the first place, and that's putting those kind of three things into it will probably be a really good start.
Absolutely. And just to point out, Michael, if you have gotten yourself into a particularly bad situation, don't rule out putting a field back into grass, or using rotational ploughing if you're in min-till, strip till, or no-till. One turnover with the plough is effective. 1 year in 4, 1 year in 5 is very effective. There's a 70% reduction on black grass year on year. So that's a very effective method as well. Or alternatively, if you are a plough-based person, to plough and then possibly establish a break crop through a min-till situation. Don't ever rule out hand rubbing. It's 100% effective.
Bill, I want to come back to you for kind of the final question on this, because we've gone through a lot. And funny enough that John mentioned ploughing there a second ago. But you've been on a journey, obviously, away from the plough for the last number of years. Looking back on that is kind of the first part of the question, but looking back on that, is there any advice that you might offer other farmers who are considering changing away from the plough-based system in terms of different actions, or does the soil need to be set up before you kind of go at it, or is there something that you would think, God, if I would have known that, then I would have done it differently?
Well, we don't feel that going away from the plough had any negative effect on this, Michael, to be honest with you. But I suppose, you see, we went away from the plough from winter. I think the winter wheat crop, the final winter wheat crop was ploughed from my memory. But following on from that, I think they were all, when we went to spring barley, it was all with, the non-inversion tillage type thing. So I suppose in the situation where we were going to spring cropping, it had no negative effect. I'm convinced, because don't forget our previous rotation in this field, which would have been spring oats, winter wheat, maybe a couple of winter barleys. In the plough situation, it was getting very much out of control.
Okay, so plough wasn't a cure to it either.
Not where you had mostly winter crops.
Okay. It needs to be a combination of all of those various different elements of it. And considering, I suppose, maybe that it's been a number of years now where you might have put the plough into it. Would you consider ploughing that maybe in the future to try and maybe bring up a kind of a fresh seed bed, I suppose, that you could kind of min-till thereafter?
We have deep loosening legs on this, so I suppose there's a little bit of a rise of, of the deeper soil. It's being aerated and opened up a little bit. So I see no reason to plough it, to be honest with you. And I'm not anti-plough or anything like that, but we're happy now with how it's working at the moment. Okay, brilliant. Look, that's great, Bill. Thanks very much for that, and thanks very much, John, for your contribution as well. Delighted you could join us in the podcast.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
So that's it for this week, and my thanks to Bill and John for joining me on the podcast. Just a couple of areas before I sign off today. In order to understand the aspects of the podcast which are most appealing and beneficial to you, I would greatly appreciate if you could take 3 to 4 minutes to complete a survey. The details of this are in the podcast notes. Finally, don't forget, if you enjoyed this podcast, and recommend it to a friend or colleague, and as always, rate and follow on Apple Podcast or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.